At 3:47 this morning, 12 hours after the Senate voted to convict and remove the president from office, federal law enforcement personnel entered the Oval Office. 4 deputy U.S. Marshals, 3 Secret Service agents operating under Director Kimberly Cheadle's directive, and 1 FBI supervisor overseeing coordination. They discovered the former president sitting alone at the Resolute desk reviewing documents. "Sir, the United States Senate has convicted and removed you from office. You are no longer the president. We are here to assist with your departure from the White House. Will you accompany us voluntarily?" According to individuals present in the room, the former president replied, "This is unlawful. I am the president. I was elected by the American people. You do not have the authority to remove me." The marshal responded, "Sir, the Constitution grants the Senate the power to remove presidents through conviction. That power was exercised yesterday. We are carrying out a lawful order. Please come with us." At 4:03 a.m., 16 minutes after federal agents entered the Oval Office, the former president exited the White House for the final time. Subscribe to this channel immediately because what I am about to explain is not about political victory or defeat. This is the moment when the American constitutional system demonstrated its ability to enforce its most severe remedy, even when a president refuses to accept it. This is the Secret Service, as Director Cheadle pledged, enabling the lawful transfer of power. And this is democracy enduring its most critical test. Turn on notifications and set them to all because the constitutional crisis that has gripped the nation for weeks concluded at 4:03 a.m. when the former president left the White House. The question now is what kind of country emerges from this crisis and whether the institutions that carried out the removal can preserve public trust. Here is what occurred during the 12 hours between the Senate conviction and the physical removal, because the timeline shows how the standoff concluded. At 6:23 p.m. yesterday, U.S. Marshals arrived at the White House Northwest Gate and were stopped by Secret Service agents loyal to the former president. That confrontation continued throughout the evening. At 8:47 p.m., Secret Service Director Cheadle personally arrived at the White House. She entered through a secure entrance and met with agents assigned to the Presidential Protection Detail. According to sources, she told the agents directly, "The Senate has removed him. He is no longer the president. Our oath is to the Constitution, not to any individual. We will not block the lawful enforcement of a Senate conviction. Any agent who obstructs federal law enforcement from carrying out lawful orders will be dismissed and may face prosecution." At 9:34 p.m., 3 agents assigned to the detail departed the White House and joined the protection team for the new president. At 10:15 p.m., 2 additional agents left. By midnight, only 7 Secret Service agents remained with the former president, and those 7 were uncertain. At 1:47 a.m., Director Cheadle met with the remaining agents and issued a direct order. Stand down, allow the marshals to enter, facilitate departure, or resign immediately and face disciplinary consequences. At 2:34 a.m., the final holdout agents stood down. The route was cleared for federal law enforcement to proceed. At 3 a.m., the U.S. Marshal Service, working with the Secret Service and the FBI, finalized the plan. 4 marshals would enter the Oval Office. 3 Secret Service agents would accompany them to demonstrate agency support for the operation. The FBI would secure the perimeter. The objective was a peaceful departure, but marshals were authorized to use necessary force if the former president physically resisted. At 3:47 a.m., they entered. Press the like button right now if you understand the magnitude of what just occurred. Federal law enforcement removed a former president from the White House 12 hours after the Senate convicted him because he refused to leave on his own. The algorithm determines what gains visibility. You decide whether this analysis reaches those who need to see it, because what I am showing you is the constitutional system enforcing removal, even when the removed president resisted with every available tool. At 3:47 a.m., the confrontation in the Oval Office lasted 16 minutes. The former president was not alone when agents entered. 2 personal aides were present, 1 private attorney and 1 remaining political advisor. All were instructed to leave the room. They complied. The former president was then given a choice: depart voluntarily or be escorted. According to sources, he stated, "I will not leave voluntarily. If you remove me, you are violating the Constitution and committing an unlawful act. I will fight this in court. I will take this to the American people, but I will not walk out of this office of my own free will." The lead marshal replied, "Sir, we understand your position, but the law is clear. The Senate convicted you. You have been removed. We are required to enforce that removal. We prefer a peaceful resolution. Will you walk with us, or must we physically escort you?" The former president stood up. He gathered personal items from the desk, papers, a phone, and a photograph. He then said, "You are committing a historic error. The American people will not forget this. I am being removed unlawfully, but I will not give you the satisfaction of dragging me out. I will walk under protest, and this is not finished." At 4:03 a.m., the former president exited the Oval Office, flanked by U.S. Marshals. Secret Service agents who had stood down watched in silence. He walked through the West Wing hallway and out onto the South Lawn. A government vehicle was waiting. Not Marine One, not a presidential motorcade, a standard black SUV. The former president entered the back seat. The vehicle left the White House grounds. And for the first time since the crisis began, the White House was no longer occupied by someone the Senate had removed from office. Leave a comment right now. Tell me whether you believe this removal was constitutional or whether the former president was correct in claiming it was illegal. I am reading every response because this question will be debated for generations. At 4:15 a.m., the new president entered the White House for the first time as president, not as acting president, not as vice president. As president, confirmed by Senate conviction and removal of the predecessor, the new president entered the Oval Office, sat at the resolute desk, and issued the first executive order. All federal agencies are directed to resume normal operations under the lawful chain of command. The constitutional crisis is over. The government will function. That order was distributed to every cabinet department, every federal agency, and every military command. The message was clear. There is one president. The crisis has ended. Move forward. At 6:08 a.m., the new president conducted the first morning national security briefing in the Oval Office. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs presented the overnight threat assessment. The director of national intelligence briefed on global developments. The Secretary of Defense reviewed military posture. It was a standard presidential briefing, the type that occurs every morning, except this was the first one conducted by the new president in the White House, hours after the former president had been physically removed. Subscribe to this channel now if you haven't already, because what I am about to show you is how the country and the world are responding to the removal and what it means for American democracy moving forward. At 7 a.m., major networks interrupted regular programming to report that the former president had been removed from the White House overnight. Video showed the government vehicle departing the grounds at 4:03 a.m. Images showed the new president entering at 4:15 a.m., along with statements from the White House declaring the constitutional crisis over. Coverage was global. Every major international news organization led with the story that a U.S. president convicted by the Senate had been physically removed from office after refusing to leave. At 8 a.m., Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer held a press conference. Last night, the constitutional system functioned as intended. The Senate exercised its authority to convict and remove. The former president refused to accept that decision, but the rule of law prevailed. Federal law enforcement led by Secret Service agents who honored their oath to the Constitution facilitated the removal. This is not a victory for any party. It is a victory for the Constitution. Schumer was asked whether the removal was handled appropriately. He replied, "No one wanted physical removal, but when a president defies the Senate's constitutional authority, enforcement is required. That enforcement occurred peacefully and lawfully." At 8:30 a.m., Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who voted to convict, issued a statement. The Senate's conviction was based on clear evidence that the president defied the Supreme Court. 68 senators, including 17 Republicans, concluded removal was necessary. When the former president refused to accept that judgment, enforcement became unavoidable. I supported conviction. I support its enforcement. The Senate's power to remove presidents must be real. Last night proved that it is. At 9 a.m., Chief Justice John Roberts released a brief statement through the Supreme Court. The Senate exercised its constitutional authority to try and convict a president. That process was conducted in accordance with constitutional requirements. Enforcement of the Senate's verdict upholds the separation of powers and the rule of law. Roberts did not elaborate further, but his statement affirmed the legitimacy of both the conviction and the removal. At 10 a.m., the former president issued a statement through his legal team. I was unlawfully removed from the White House by federal agents acting under unconstitutional orders. The Senate conviction was based on a fraudulent impeachment. I remain the lawful president. I will pursue every legal remedy and continue fighting for the American people who elected me. That statement indicates the former president will challenge the conviction in court and does not accept that he has been removed. At 11 a.m., the new president addressed the nation from the Oval Office. My fellow Americans, the constitutional crisis that has gripped our nation has ended. The Senate exercised its authority. I have taken office. The former president has departed the White House. I know many of you supported him. I know many of you have questions, but I ask you to accept what the Constitution requires. The Senate convicted. That conviction removed him from office. The government must now function. I am committed to healing our divisions and restoring trust in our institutions. We will move forward together. The address lasted 10 minutes and focused on unity and moving beyond the crisis. Here is what we are watching in the weeks and months ahead. 6 indicators that will reveal how the country recovers from this crisis. Indicator 1. Does the former president launch a serious legal challenge to the conviction? If lawsuits are filed arguing the Senate lacked authority, courts will need to decide whether Senate convictions can be reviewed. Indicator 2, do Republican voters accept the conviction or see it as illegitimate? If polling shows large majorities of Republicans believe the removal was unlawful, it signals deep and lasting division. Indicator 3, does the new president govern effectively and build public support? Competent leadership that wins over skeptics validates the removal. Failure reinforces claims that the crisis was political, not constitutional. Indicator 4, do any federal employees or military personnel refuse to recognize the new president? Continued resistance inside government suggests the crisis is not fully resolved. Indicator 5, does Congress pass legislation clarifying impeachment and removal procedures? If lawmakers believe the process exposed gaps, they may seek to address them. Indicator 6, do historians and constitutional scholars reach consensus on the legitimacy of the removal? If opinion converges, precedent is established. If division remains, the controversy endures. Here are 3 long-term scenarios. Scenario 1, the nation accepts the removal and moves forward. The new president governs successfully. Legal challenges fail. Public opinion shifts toward viewing the crisis as the system working. Within a year, it is seen as a historic but resolved constitutional moment. This is the healing scenario. Scenario 2. The nation remains deeply divided. Half view the removal as legitimate, half view it as a coup. The former president becomes a symbol of resistance. The new president struggles with credibility. Institutional trust remains low. This is the continued division scenario. Scenario 3, the crisis damages something fundamental. Faith in the Senate's impeachment power erodes. Future presidents believe they can defy Supreme Court rulings if they resist removal. The constitutional system is permanently weakened. This is the damage scenario. Subscribe now. Like this video. Comment with your prediction. Which scenario defines America's future? I am tracking all 3, and as events unfold, you will see the analysis here. Let me show you the historical significance. In 234 years of American history, the Senate had never convicted and removed a president. Andrew Johnson was acquitted by 1 vote. Bill Clinton was acquitted easily. Donald Trump was acquitted twice. But today, that changed. The Senate voted 68 to 32. 17 Republicans joined all Democrats. And when the former president refused to leave, federal law enforcement removed him. That has never occurred before. The impeachment power existed in theory for over 2 centuries. Last night, it was enforced in reality. This matters because it confirms that Senate conviction is not symbolic. It is enforceable. A president who is convicted and removed cannot simply refuse to leave. The Secret Service, as Director Cheadle stated, protects the office, not the individual. The U.S. Marshals execute lawful orders, including removing former presidents who occupy the White House without authority, and the constitutional system, when pushed to its absolute limit, held. What I know for certain is this. At 3:47 a.m., federal agents entered the Oval Office. At 4:03 a.m., the former president left the White House. At 4:15 a.m., the new president entered. At 6:08 a.m., the first national security briefing took place. The constitutional crisis that began with the cabinet invoking the 25th Amendment escalated through Supreme Court defiance. Emergency powers, impeachment, and conviction concluded with the physical removal of a former president who refused to accept his removal. The system worked. It took weeks. It required bipartisan impeachment in the House. It required Senate conviction with 17 Republicans breaking party loyalty. It required the Secret Service to choose the Constitution over an individual. It required federal law enforcement to physically remove someone from the White House. But it worked. The coming months will reveal whether this crisis strengthened or weakened American democracy. Did we prove that the constitutional system can restrain even the most defiant president? Or did we demonstrate that enforcing basic constitutional principles requires extraordinary measures and perilously close calls? The answer depends on whether this becomes a precedent future presidents fear or an example future presidents believe they can replicate if they push far enough. What is certain is this. The American presidency will never be the same. Every future president will know Senate conviction is real. Removal can be enforced, and defying the Supreme Court can cost you the office. Every senator will know that convicting a president of their own party is possible because 17 Republicans did it. And every citizen will know that the constitutional crisis of 2026 ended with the system enforcing its rules, even when the individual subject to those rules resisted with everything he had. Stay with this channel. Turn on notifications. The constitutional crisis has ended, but its consequences will unfold for years. When courts rule on the former president's legal challenges, when the new president's policies take shape, and when historians evaluate what occurred, you will see the analysis here. This is not over, but the most dangerous phase, the moment when enforcement was uncertain, is over. The Constitution endured, democracy endured, and America moves forward, knowing that the rule of law tested to its breaking point held.